The call came at exactly 3:42 p.m. I remember because I was staring at the clock as the final signatures of a $30 million merger were being passed around the boardroom like sacred scripture. It was a moment I had envisioned for years: top-floor office, panoramic skyline views, the faint pop of champagne corks, executives clapping, congratulatory nods from people who once doubted me. The deal was supposed to crown my legacy. But when my phone buzzed and I picked it up, everything changed. A trembling voice whispered, "Amanda, it's Danielle, she's in the hospital." He kicked her, she collapsed, there's blood everywhere. I stood up. My hand, still holding the pen, trembled. I placed it down gently, looked around the room at all the suits and smug smiles, and walked out. No words. No explanation. That deal never happened. And in that moment, something inside me fractured. What happened next shattered every illusion I had about justice, family, and power. It didn't just break me. It remade me. This is the story of what I did. Of what I lost. Of what I found when I decided that the rules no longer applied. This isn't just a story of abuse and silence. It's a war. A reckoning. And it ends in fire. My name is Amanda Taylor. I was born into nothing and turned it into everything. I built my company, AXA Technologies, from scratch. From coffee-stained laptops in cafes and endless nights in code to managing 400 employees and steering major government contracts. In corporate circles, I was known as the Ice Queen, efficient, calculated, and relentless. But beneath the armor, I was always a sister first. Danielle, my baby sister, was everything I wasn't. Dreamy, soft, empathetic. She painted sunrises, loved handwritten letters, cried during sad commercials. She had this eternal belief in people, especially the ones who didn't deserve it. When she met Jacob Holloway at a fundraiser gala, I was out of town. When I returned, she was already enchanted. He came from generational wealth. The Holloways owned real estate across 5 states, sat on multiple boards, and had politicians in their pocket. Their family crest was older than most cities. Jacob himself was all polish. 3-piece suits, manicured hands, a voice like a velvet knife. But behind the smile, I saw something else: calculated entitlement. A predator in a silk tie. 6 months later, they were married in a lavish outdoor wedding. I stood by her side, silent. I didn't want to ruin her day. But the unease had already settled in my chest like a stone. By her 5th month of pregnancy, Danielle was hiding bruises. She flinched when you moved too quickly. Her laughter, once easy, was forced. She told me she'd slipped. That the stress was making Jacob edgy. That he needed support. But she was shrinking in front of my eyes. The Holloways dismissed my concerns. His mother, Evelyn, told me once over wine, "Danielle needs to learn to carry herself better. We Holloway women know how to keep the men calm." That was the moment I knew they were complicit. I offered Danielle everything: an apartment, lawyers, security. But she stayed. She always believed he would change. That love was enough. But love doesn't bruise you. It doesn't leave you breathless and scared. And monsters don't change. They just evolve. Sunday. Mid-October. The trees were fire-colored outside the Holloway estate in Hinsdale, a monstrosity of marble and crystal and soulless opulence. They were hosting a family dinner, politicians, relatives from out of state, powerful men and their polished wives. Danielle was 38 weeks pregnant. She should have been resting. Her doctor had warned her about her blood pressure. But Jacob insisted she come. Said it would be disrespectful to skip. According to the housemaid Elena, who would later risk her job and safety to help us, Jacob berated her all evening. He called her fat. Useless. An embarrassment. When she finally stood up to leave, to escape the humiliation, he followed her into the hallway. And there, in full view of half a dozen people, he kicked her. In the stomach. Her scream was sharp. Guttural. She collapsed to the marble floor. Blood pooled instantly. And they all, just stood there. Frozen. Silent. As if it hadn't happened. Only Elena moved. She called the ambulance. Then she called me. I remember the exact moment the phone rang. The panic in her voice. I remember standing up in that boardroom, heart pounding, barely able to breathe. And then walking out like I was in a dream. Rush University Medical Center was a whirlwind. Flashing lights. Scrubbed figures. A gurney streaked with blood. Danielle was unconscious. Her belly still. Her skin pale. I wanted to scream but couldn't. A doctor grabbed my arm and said, "We need to operate now. The baby's in distress. Sign this." I signed everything. They wheeled her away, and I collapsed into the waiting room chair. 2 agonizing hours passed. The doctor returned with blood on his gloves. "The baby's alive, but very weak," he said. "We've moved him to NICU. Your sister is stable. But fragile." I walked into her room. Machines beeped. Tubes were everywhere. I held her hand. Whispered that she was safe. Then the nurse told me Jacob had already been bailed out. 3 hours. That's all it took for his family to erase the violence. They released statements to the media calling it a tragic accident. Anonymous tips claimed Danielle was mentally unstable. There were whispers of her falling down the stairs. The rage that rose inside me then, it didn't feel human. It felt volcanic. Ancient. And unstoppable. Danielle woke up 3 days later. Her voice was hoarse. Her eyes wild. "Where's my baby?" she asked. I showed her pictures. Held her hand as she sobbed. But her spirit was cracked. She wouldn't speak for days. Just stared at the ceiling. Flinched at sudden sounds. Blamed herself. And that's when I knew, I couldn't just help her. I had to destroy him. I assembled a war room. My penthouse became headquarters. I brought in investigators, forensic analysts, ex-intelligence agents. Everyone owed me a favor, and I called them all in. What we found was horrific. Jacob had a past. 2 ex-girlfriends had pressed charges, both cases settled quietly. One had miscarried after an incident. Another had disappeared to another state. I tracked them down. Got sworn affidavits. He was laundering money through fake charities. hiding assets in the Cayman Islands. He had offshore shell companies linked to bribery schemes. I compiled everything: ledgers, audio files, hidden emails. And then came Elena. She risked everything to get me the internal footage. The moment he kicked Danielle. The silence. The horror. With Danielle's consent, I leaked it all. The internet erupted. #Justice for Danielle trended for weeks. News outlets dug into the Holloway dynasty. Sponsors pulled out. Politicians distanced themselves. Jacob was rearrested. No bail this time. The trial was broadcast nationally. People lined up outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs. Survivors told their stories online. Danielle testified. Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. She told the truth. So did I. The prosecution laid it all out: abuse, fraud, corruption. The jury watched the footage again and again. Jacob's lawyers tried every dirty trick, but it was too late. The verdict? Guilty. The sentence? 28 years, no parole. I watched as Jacob was led away. He looked at me. I didn't flinch. Justice had a face, and it was mine. Danielle moved in with me. Slowly, she healed. Noah, our miracle baby, thrived. He survived surgeries, setbacks, infections. But he grew stronger. Danielle began painting again. Her first piece. A phoenix. I turned down the deal I once walked away from. Instead, I started the Artemis Initiative, a nonprofit offering legal help, shelter, and therapy to abuse survivors. We expanded to 6 states in 1 year. A year later, I received a letter from Melissa, one of Jacob's exes. She had a daughter, Jacob's daughter. The girl had lived in shame. Had questions no one would answer. With Melissa's help, we did a paternity test. It matched. We created a trust from the assets I had frozen. And then we did more. We launched the Phoenix Foundation, in honor of all the women who rose from the ashes. Danielle now speaks at conferences. Noah is thriving. He calls me Mimi. The Holloway estate. Bought and converted into a recovery shelter. And me? I wear my armor still, but it's forged in fire now. Sharper. Stronger. Purposeful. Because blood is blood. And mine. Mine fights. Mine rises. Mine avenges. And if the darkness ever comes again, it'll learn that I am the storm. The end.